Hi, Space Gab. Welcome back to our part two of the moon. You will be hearing this in the year of our Lord 2024 on October the 24th. Chris has said that we need to do more, and he realizes all the things that we've left out about the moon, so that is to be upcoming. And next week, I believe, we have a ghost story for you all. All right, well, let's get to it. Enjoy. Happy listening, Space Cabbers.
Yeah, that's it. It's an exciting, inspiring piece of culture. I mean, how much of it is actually real? That's a much more complex issue. Like I think what Mars would be making out in this article, where he kind of lays it all out, is that the whole moon thing did go down sort of in a situation where the whole alien UFO thing was going on, and it was like coexisting. And in very much it did kind of represent like a public facing kind of propaganda,
Yes.
kind of like presentation to the masses of like brave
Absolutely.
humanity going to space.
Absolutely.
And I think if you view it in the lens of, yes, UFOs are real and the government's not really telling the people, everything that is even tangentially related to space, is going to essentially be controlled narrative. How couldn't it be, given what we all know, having watched the powerful governments in our world like our entire lives and have any studying of history, like, the public doesn't get to hear the whole story of what's going on.
We don't, but we deserve. How much truth do we deserve?
Well, that's a good question. Like,
It is.
I mean, I like to think in a sense that we all have the right to know, but like,
everything. Yeah.
Like, I think that's a luxury of just being some schlub, just somebody guessing. I mean, I think I have the right to know, but I don't have to be in the government and consider the implications and take the blame for whatever the fuck comes out of that. I mean, I have to kind of just accept that they have the power and I don't. And, I can be a little tiny part of like maybe some sort of cultural movement to sort of like push for disclosure, I guess. It's frustrating. So yeah, I think Mars basically would say all that and kind of like in without having any absolute proof or having any absolute certainty about it. Like there's just a lot of very interesting details that can inform a picture that's compatible with that. But like I think it's sort of like the conundrum of the whole UFO fucking thing. Is like, we have a pretty good bead that it's real, but like exactly the contours of it is a bit of a house of mirrors.
It's getting super.
It's a house of mirrors.
It's a house of mirrors.
And it's like that's a classic. That's a classic propaganda technique. Like the Russians call it flooding the zone with shit.
Oh,
like it's like it's a whole.
See, that's what you meant. I thought you meant the phenomenon.
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of different ways
presenting itself.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a whole different thing. Okay, and I think that's a very interesting line of framing for the whole thing. No, what I was just getting at is that like a lot of what we are sort of told to believe by the government, is sort of like, I would say that it's deliberately being confusing and contradicting in order to just keep sort of the zone full of shit, so that when we hear the truth part of it, we don't necessarily know how to differentiate it from all the other probably bullshit stuff that's kind of floating out there. It's a classic. It's a classic propaganda technique, like all the big boy propagandas.
It's right here, but we can't. The left, the right, the left hand. It's a cheap ass magician trick.
Yeah. Well, like the real question is like how deep is the control matrix? How concentrated in one little point is it or isn't it? Like, I don't know. There's certainly like a rumor that sort of floats around the UFO thing that would sort of say that there's a lot more cooperation between the various poles in the world politics than they might let on, given the UFO reality.
Of course.
That, yes, they'll bicker over territory and economics
Russia
and war stuff.
America always had that agreement between each other because of UAP.
Yeah, exactly. And
UFOs.
it's sort of like, if there's reality to the UAP thing, then of course that has to be part of our calculus as to how we understand their actions, right? Like, it's either real or it isn't. And
Have
like,
you
if
read?
it's real, then that
Yeah.
has a lot of implications for basically everything, right? So yeah, the science on the moon, like, it was really humming before they actually got the astronauts down on the surface, and like they were finding all kinds of things that were kind of confusing the scientists. Like, there were lots of really weird things about the moon. For example, dating rocks. It's a kind of complicated thing. There's lots of different techniques to do it, and like, scientists will have arguments over like the different techniques of dating rocks. So that's like a bit of a
Contentious?
well, I mean, it's necessarily a little bit contentious, and I think you'd have to kind of take all of these particular facts with some knowledge of the fact that, like, maybe ages that are determined for things are not universally supported by every scientist. It gives some kind of wiggle room
Fair.
when they're trying to argue with some sort of other agenda. Like, if they're trying to talk us out of aliens in some way, like, they could argue against these facts. But anyway, like, what they found, that some moon rocks, there's a technique where they examine with microscopes the tracks burned into moon rocks by cosmic rays, because they don't have an atmosphere protecting them from cosmic rays.
Apparently.
So they're like sitting on the surface of this airless.
Apparently.
Yeah, well, there might be a little bit of atmosphere.
Thin atmosphere.
But I mean, I think actually, I think that's been demonstrated. Like, I'm not sure the Apollo people had that nailed, but I think maybe it's nailed now. But anyway, it's real thin. But it doesn't protect the rocks from being bombarded by compact rays the way our atmosphere protects our rocks from being bombarded this way. Our atmosphere is pretty thick compared, so it actually, cosmic rays, the intensity of it is much lower, like, for the rocks on Earth than they are there. So basically, they can date these rocks through that method of examining the tracks burned by cosmic rays into the, like, microscopic tracks burned by cosmic rays.
Wow.
Like, in the rocks that they got from the moon.
I want one.
Yeah, like, the Apollo program bought back a few 100 pounds of moon rock.
And you're allowed to buy some, maybe.
Yeah, like, there's some on the market. It's really expensive because there's not that much of it, and it's like there's a whole bunch of it that's government property, and they're not allowed to sell. Right. But yeah, like, there's been a number of rocks that were given away, and a few of them were broken up into slightly smaller rocks to make a better product. But fuck, I'd have one if I could buy one. I'd be very happy to get one. Absolutely. When I was a kid, I still have this somewhere. A relative gave me like a piece of fossilized dinosaur bone that she'd picked up off of like the ground, like in the Badlands in Alberta, like where someplace where they find fossils of them. Yes, they do. So yeah, like, I have a few of these pieces of actual dinosaur, and it's like they have kind of a magic power for me. I believe that, and I still have them. That would be they're in a box precious somewhere. Magic. Yeah, so a moon rock, I think, would have that for me too.
We have to clarify that you have to not take things from places in other sites, out of countries, people amongst Space Cab's listening community. Just to be fair point. Oh, generally, sure. Don't steal. But don't take a native.
Right, and the aliens are presumably, like, it's the aliens that are natives of the moon. Like, I mean, that's kind of like my understanding of it, but like, not to say that I have proof of this, but like the preponderance of the evidence takes me there. Like, I mean, oh my gosh. It's hard to have any certainty around these things, like, society is learning slowly. They're doling out the details. Like, there's still moon science going on. Like there's a whole controversy about how the moon even exists. Yes. Okay. Like, there's a lot of like weird things about it that don't quite add up, and I'll start cataloging them. But I guess what I'm trying to say in a larger context is sort of like, I think it's a journey that as humanity presumably will go on, because the moon's so close by that really it's unavoidable. Like, we have to look at it, we have to talk about it, we have to know about it. It's that magic ball in the sky that connects us to the universe. Like, it's just, come on, it's like It's
The
like a
screen
magic
cheese,
thing that I see out my window, and it's
Um,
sort of like it's the furthest object that you can see and identify. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of like
yes,
it's
you
sort
can
of a
see where they are.
constant companion
It
to
is. It
humanity,
is.
and
It
I
has
think
an astrological meaning as well.
sure. Well, how could it not? Like, I
Yes.
mean, look, ancients looking upon the skies and the heavens, like their understanding went way beyond the moon, but the moon was very key to all of that. I think the ancient knowledge of
On
like
the other hand, I have heard that are there not native Aboriginal peoples who, in their teachings, know that there was a time when before there was a moon? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it comes up in the Mars article.
Oh, all
I'll
right.
find
I'm
the
so sorry.
reference.
I didn't mean to off track us. We can continue along. You're right.
Yeah, well, there's a few. Like there's
Right.
an ancient Greek kind of
Okay.
people in the northern parts of the whole Greek, ancient Greece kind of thing, and they were
Yes.
called the Proselyans, and like they were written about in some ancient Greek writings that we have.
Yes, I feel like the Stuart Swerdlow mentions.
It comes up, you know, because it's an ancient source, and it talks about basically in there like pre-Solene basically means before moon people, and they had a whole sort of part of their sort of iconography of the moon's arrival, and they're being the culture that was like from before the moon came, and they're not the only ones. Like there's other examples. Like there's well, I'll revisit it like
Fair.
when I get through the text to that point. Because like Mars actually gives a bunch. He comes with the details on all that stuff, and I can list it off. But
he's so knowledgeable.
Yeah.
He's gone now, dear soul. Is he not?
Yeah, I think he passed in 2016.
God bless. Rest in peace. Yeah, I was very sad because I heard him interviewed like right up until like the month before he was gone, you know, like, well, you know, he's such a great speaker that, you know, like I would sort of seek out his appearances like on all the woo-woo kind of radio, that stuff that I kind of love listening to sometimes, you know. I've always it's always been like a boredom cure. Paranormal radio, you know, it's a great format. You know, I love what they've invented. Yeah, it brings us together. Yeah. So anyway, they're finding that the moon is 4.5 billion years old, which is basically older than the Earth by a billion.
Nearly by a billion years, and nearly as basically old as the solar system. So
like, you know, hello. So okay. I ask myself then, did it drive itself here for a reason? Did the source do that? What's going on? Space. Well, we're not the end of the universe, are we?
Well, I think what we have to consider, and this is something that comes up a bit later in the Mars thing, but like again, we can sort of start nibbling on it. Yeah, like there's an implication that possibly the moon is essentially an alien spaceship, right? Like kind of an artificially created sort of planetoid that has been parked in its orbit very precisely. Yeah, you know, and there's a whole bunch of kind of observational kind of sciencey things that could support a theory like that, but it's not proof of a theory like that. It's just kind of enough to kind of certainly make a case for some moon observations that conform to something like that, you know. And it's like, I mean, that's an unimaginable kind of technology that us puny ape guys we're not gonna like puppets. Hardly get our head around such a wild thing. But you know, I mean, some of these alien races that we're supposedly dealing with, you know, like they're like can be like a million years technologically beyond us. You know, like they got like magic that we can't even hardly imagine. I figure, you know, it's sort of like you kind of run into the edge of what's even possible. You know, like who knows? Like maybe we'll know someday, but we don't know at this point. it seems. So yeah, like so the moon is older than the planets, and again, that's not universally agreed upon, but there certainly is some scientific like evidence. Like there's a million theories as to like how the moon was formed. Some people think that the moon was sort of left over from the forming of the Earth. Like most of the dust formed into the main body, but a bunch of it.
But it doesn't
didn't
match up somehow, does it?
Well,
when you look at what's the moon,
there's
the moon
all kinds of problems with that theory.
Yeah.
Like number one is sort of like the physics about gravity would say that the big body would just suck all the dust that's local in. There wouldn't really be enough left over not being sucked in, so
Right.
a moon can form. Like that doesn't really make sense in that sense. So like again, the moon exists, so we're just trying to explain it from millions of years later.
Right.
Like hard to know
How did we
exactly
get
how
here?
you even frame that. Like I mean, I think it just underscores sort of how mysterious the moon is, like even to the scientists in a way that they'll admit to.
Yes.
Because like not
What did
every
Carl
scientist
Sagan
is working
say?
for the man. Like a lot of them are just
Some of them are.
Some
of them are.
Presumably they are, but
Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know it for certain, but I don't think he's real.
I find him pompous as fuck. So
Carl Sagan says a natural satellite cannot be. Oh, we haven't gotten there yet.
We'll get to that. But Carl Sagan said that basically there's no geological planet formation kind of thing that they could imagine that could happen in nature naturally.
Right.
That would coalesce into a hollow sphere.
No,
like
things,
gravity pulls things into balls. Like you can see them everywhere, all the planets, all the whatever. Like they're all being clumped together essentially into balls. Like if they're not big enough to really squeeze themselves into ball shape,
right,
that's just because they're not big enough. Like so you got your asteroids and your various space rocks that are obviously not spheres, but anything bigger than a certain amount,
right?
Like the gravity just pulls it into a circle. Like it's just kind of like
makes sense.
It's just physics, really.
Yeah.
So like if it was hollow.
Oh, we didn't get there. Did we get there?
Well, we will get there.
All right.
Because I am working through this. It's just sort of like these kind of diversions. Like they're just gonna like.
Sorry.
No. Yes. It's fun, and I can speak to all these things. Fair. But it's sort of like I am sort of trying to follow a text in order because Jim Marrs is really like the he's the actual brain, kind of like framing this whole particular layout. Again,
not to dismiss Ingo Swann in any way.
Oh no, I love Ingo, and we'll get to him because there's an angle of him on moon stuff that's a very important one, but it's not. And Jim Marrs was like a huge chronicler of the remote viewing program.
Was he?
There is another chapter in this very same book that deals with Ingo Swann and like SRI and all like the early remote viewing stuff. Like he wrote a whole book about that whole program too. Like Jim Marrs was like he was
to get it included in the library, Christopher. It's sorrowful.
I would recommend I'd say most of his books you probably can still get. He was quite popular. Like he was a successful writer. Like I don't know how to
documentary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the guy was one of the smartest, most articulate guys that's ever existed, really. Like I could have listened to that guy talk all day, really. Like I never got bored.
I wish we could bring him back. I mean, we are in a way. We're paying homage right now, and he might be here with us in spirit.
Yeah, well, that opens up a whole can of worms that, like, I mean, I don't even know what to think about.
Go that way.
Well, it's just sort of like, who fucking knows? Like, like, I don't know, maybe. Like, I hope so. Like, I mean, let's put it this way. I hope for an afterlife. I think that's great. I'm all down with it. Like, I want it. But I also know that it could be wishful thinking, so I don't count on it.
Yes,
and that's a sad reality. But like that's kind of where I land on it.
Right. Okay. Where are we now?
Okay, so more geology stuff that's kind of weird about the moon.
Yes.
So the moon lunar surface, it's got this sort of dusty soil and then lots of rocks everywhere.
Right.
And it's sort of like the lunar dust proves to be a completely different kind of rock than all the rocks that are sitting on it. And it's basically 1 billion years older than all the rocks that are sitting on it. And it's like,
Okay.
there's like no
Weird.
really good.
Weird.
Well, it's sort of
I
like.
mean, and I know you're not supposed to say weird because weird just means we don't know what it is yet. So
Well, it's kind of
I
a
mean,
thing. It's like the moon is right there. We look at it all the time.
well,
But
okay.
like humanity doesn't have a huge presence there. I mean, in recent years, China and India have sent lunar landers. I believe the Chinese one is called like Jade Rabbit, which is cool. And it's a lander and it's like a robot that's crawling around on the moon.
I hope it's hopping.
That's an interesting question. Like my guess is it's not hopping.
Fair.
Because everything I've heard about space rover robots is they move really slowly. It's all very like deliberate. It's like it's sort of like jumping and shit. That's probably rough on a very delicate machine. Like they could probably just have it roll or whatever. But still, I like the idea. And they did name it after a rabbit. So like that's the implication. Yeah, and I believe India landed a lander on the moon.
Yeah,
on pretty
the dark
recently.
Side. Wait a minute, back to the rocks and the dust of completely different chemical construction, and the rocks had to have come later.
Well, the rocks were younger than the dust that they're sitting in, and they were also basically very different kind of rocks. They weren't the same elements, so it was sort of like and it's sort of like it's hard to really get down to the nitty gritty of like how something that's analogous to a soil even forms on a planetoid without major kind of atmospherics, whether there's a thin atmosphere or not. There's not thought to be the same forces of erosion that kind of guide all of this kind of formation on the Earth. So I don't know, like I've always imagined that maybe the moon is sort of a gravity object drifting through dusty space, just kind of picks up dust in a way. And that maybe the dust that the moon rocks sit in is sort of, well, like when the astronauts get a scoop of it and bring it back to Earth and they get it to the labs and they do all this testing, the dust seems older than the rocks that they're getting from the same site.
I'd like to buy some of the dust, frankly. I wonder if any of that's available.
Well, who knows? Like, honestly, I think actual moon samples are pretty rarefied. So, like, yes, they exist, and there are some that are sold and bought and sold. But I think they're...
Is it a black market situation?
No, like, there's a bunch of rock samples that were given away for legitimate reasons. They were given as sort of honorary gifts to various Akimuks that were connected in and around the American space program, politics, kind of complex or whatever.
Very fair.
So there's lots of rocks that are legit in the tradable space that haven't been stolen like in any nefarious way from NASA or whatever. Like that's not the implication. Yeah, well, look, I mean, if I was rich and had more money than sense, like, I mean, I could get behind spending like large on a moon rock or whatever.
Some of that
just ingest
dust. No, not necessarily. I don't believe such. Yeah. Is that fair?
Well,
I think certainly some things have power.
If you're living on the moon rocks aren't quite so rarefied. They're just like the rocks around, right? You're just fucking piled up with them. But like here on Earth, where
they come
where
up
we
and
know
they want to buy our
basically
stuff.
about every ounce of moon rock that's ever been brought back to Earth, via the Apollo program. Like it's all cataloged. Right. Every pebble, every ounce of dust. Like
so
like there's records for all that shit. So like. As there would be with something like NASA, but like, I mean, can we believe that they're really telling us the true story of anything, right?
I mean, there have been films made upon the theory that they don't, with the premise that, in fact, they do not.
Yeah, well, the politics swirling around NASA, like over the years, has been complex and labyrinthian and convoluted. There's lots of like, interesting talk, it's hard to know. Like, I think the overall thesis of the sort of UFO thing is sort of real. So all the government's activities have to be viewed within a lens of the fact that that's real and they're dealing with it. And this is what we are showing you, which is like Apollo public facing kind of like, here's space. Right, this is what we're doing.
Right.
But, the fact that they're developing the technology, like God knows what they're really doing with it, right?
Yes,
I mean, I've heard people making claims that like there's a
John
whole
Keel
parallel
wrote about
space
it.
program
Yes.
where they were launching their own rocket missions, and like
they're
all
way
kinds of
better
stuff
than the tin cans they
was
put them-
happening. Yeah, you know,
Wow.
and there's people making claims that you know, there's lots of technology that isn't part of like the public facing NASA thing. You know, like again, your mind goes to the extremes, and who knows? Like a reverse engineering probably is a thing, given all of these other things that we're sort of led to believe might be a thing. Who knows? I think we might be going to the moon all the time, you know, but who knows whether the moon is a place that we're really allowed
Let's talk about
to be.
when we first went to the moon that we can, or am I jumping too far?
Oh no. I mean, like this is the whole Apollo program. Like was this sort of very
Talk about
public, kind of ceremonial, kind of like
yes,
doing this
we
big
needed
giant
to do
feat.
this with Kennedy.
Took billions of dollars
Yes,
and
it
100,000 scientists.
Yes,
like,
it did, and it worked. Did it? Yes.
Well, I mean,
Some
as
say.
the history books display it to us in like glorious multimedia splendor, like it absolutely worked. And they went to the moon like what, like 5 or 6 times, I think. And then
Did they? 5 or 6 times?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, again,
Right,
obviously
okay.
Google it. You could get the
Yes, I
exact
will.
number.
Yes,
But
yes.
like, yeah, it's at least that many.
Okay.
Like there were a whole bunch of missions. Apollo 11 was the first one, and that was the one that is sort of the iconic one.
Yes,
But
talk about that. But what else do you know about it? What's the backstory? What's the secret NASA story to it?
Well,
Is it too soon?
Again, it ties into the same thesis we're already talking about. Like, i.e., the UFO thing is real. NASA is part of public window dressing for space activities that are broader than what NASA is sort of told to us to be. You know, and again, like this is denied by various people, but then other people are testifying to these kinds of things. So, you know, I don't think we're granted.
Said.
Well, a whole bunch of astronauts have said some really interesting things.
Very interesting.
You know, and also very interesting is like there's a few examples of things that they're sort of rumored to have said that aren't sort of perfectly attributable, but still seem
rumors,
to have...
really great, juicy, wonderful rumors. There were others there. They were accompanied.
Well, that's what Neil Armstrong was rumored to have said at some scientific meeting in the 70s. I forget which UFO author sort of brought this out, but he was like respected. I think it might have been Timothy Good, rumored to have said that basically, we went to the moon, giant UFOs basically followed us all the way there, and that when we landed, we were surrounded by really big UFOs, and it was basically we were warned away.
Better.
Yeah, they had highly superior technology, and they were literally gigantic, and they were all around them. And like basically the implication was sort of like, no, you guys don't. This is our place.
Yeah.
Like you're not really welcome here.
Go-kart.
So, you know, basically I was thought to have paraphrased that basically, like all the plans that the Earth and the NASA had been brewing kind of even in the popular culture about what they were going to do on the moon, like moon cities, bases, mining, all this kind of crazy
So we had
crazy
hopes
stuff.
like this?
Yeah, no, apparently like on TV in the 60s, like all the science nerds were like on there, like sort of talking about the possibilities. Like
get to live up there in summer camp in the moon. And
well, you know, I think that was the eventual kind of thing that like Earth will be colonized or the moon will be colonized by like, you know, modern humans living in space cities, like in bubbles or whatever, like because there's no air up there that you can breathe, you know. I mean, look, it's a staple of sci-fi. You know, there's all kinds of books that sort of
I would have been
talk about
so into it.
Moon colonization of all kinds. I mean, it would be a great place. But what Armstrong was saying that basically, that was kind of all off.
Armstrong
we had to keep coming.
Suffered.
Yeah. No, he's a really complex guy.
Yes, he is.
I think it's fairly clear that in later life he probably suffered from some kind of depression. You know, he was a very private guy.
Yes.
And really,
truthful.
After a point, like basically refused to really do interviews or really be involved in any sort of public life, and sort of almost defiantly kind of said, well, you know, I gave a bunch of interviews after the thing. I said all this stuff, you know, I don't want to be responsible to have to fucking answer your moon questions,
Yeah.
And it's like, honestly, I think it was very courageous,
Yes, you were right.
I mean, and look, if any of this stuff is true, which, again, for me, it's just sort of a binary, either it's all true or none of it's true, and it's sort of like, as much as it annoys me to have to frame it that way, because, but I just have to admit, like, there is a possibility that this whole UFO thing is not what I'm thinking it is. I first ran across it probably in the early 2000s. Like, there was an interview. I think he looked like he was like maybe in his 40s, possibly 50s, like not super old, kind of middle-aged, kind of. And yeah, he's like a science guy, and he tells a hugely interesting, expanded story about Corso and what happened and the implications of it all. And it's fascinating, and I'd recommend it. And recently, because I think we were discussing him. I think I mentioned him. So I did look up to see if he was still around. And yeah, I found some recent videos like on just random podcasts. So like, yeah, I think he is out there, but like, I would just suggest that like, figure out his stuff a bit, have some good questions before you even approach him, because he's sort of a serious dude. Certainly. But his story is fascinating. And like, again, we could talk more into it on some other time when I actually have some reference research done. Let's go back to the moon. Sorry, kids. But he, like, Corso's son is like, seek him out, Philip Corso Jr. Like, literally, like, same name with the JR on it. Like, he's there. And there's a lot. You can find tons of it if you look.
Not to be confused with Dallas.
Very smart.
JR.
Very smart guy. Obviously a very highly intelligent guy and articulate. Like, it's a crazy ass fucking shit he lays out. So, like, again,
Corso had experiences.
Well, we know who Corso was.
Yes,
like, we know his war record. We know he was in the Pentagon. Like, we know he was like on
at the end
Eisenhower's
of his
staff.
Life. Oh wow, I know. I mean, how exciting is that? I wish to go back in my life.
I don't know.
And I would like to come back as Eisenhower. Oh my gosh!
I've never heard of a secret Corso tape, but I'd love to see it if it exists. I would think that he left
to his children.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I've viewed like public presentations by his son.
Okay.
And I don't think I've ever heard him talk about some secret video that he's not showing us. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like Corso, it's a rabbit hole, but it's an interesting one. He seemed like a cool guy. The interviews I saw with him, like he seemed very good humored and kind of articulate, like he seemed like a genuinely interesting person, and his story is wild, and he was who he said he was. So that isn't in itself proof of anything.
Alien bodies.
Well, he claims to have.
Okay, and what does,
I mean, he's
say
been
about that? What does Junior say of this?
Well, it's been a while since I've watched it, and those videos are so mind blowing. It's sort of hard to sort of totally pick out the details of things like that from my memories. But like Corso is criticized for that.
Yes,
claim.
Why?
I think the implication that's being made, and it's kind of bullshit, but I see where they're coming from, but it's sort of lame. Like, the implication is that Corso's making himself too much of the center of the thing. Like, what are the chances he was both involved in the technology in the Pentagon and when he was a junior officer saw the alien body at the base? Like, he's just in too many places.
How could he? Have you read the Luis Alessandro Imminent?
I've listened to the first couple chapters on audiobook, but I haven't got all the way through it. I need to get back to it. Yeah.
Okay.
But I haven't.
Yeah. I don't think it's completely the same.
That's the only criticism of Corso is that. Well, that's the one that sort of like seemed to gather the most kind of moss, as far as I could tell. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like,
but he was a good company man. Weren't people in the military like that? Isn't that how you get ahead? I don't know. Do you know? I'm not.
Well, I think you have to understand that Corso wrote this book and brought all this out when he was 82 and knew he didn't have much longer to live.
So you're hoping he's telling you the truth. His
claim is of truth, and I think he articulated quite clearly himself that this was a political thing for him. and he felt it was his duty to release this information is in a way that he could,
Absolutely.
just to sort of set the record straight.
Right.
And like he was, I mean, that was his claim. His claim was this all really happened, and this is supporting to the whole UFO thing that you all guys hear about. You know, this is the piece of it I know. And, you know, like, again, either Corso is real or not. You know, like, you have
What do
to
you mean?
wonder.
If he was real, now you're actually suggesting he was never a person?
No, nothing like that. I'm just saying that his story might be
Sorry.
some sort of psyop kind of propaganda thing.
Wow.
You know, like,
I mean,
he's a government guy.
Together?
Who knows?
Maybe.
Like, honestly, when it comes to intelligence and just misinformation, like, it's a hall of mirrors. You know,
No,
like,
you're right.
You know,
that's what
like,
hall of mirrors means.
Well,
I think
it's
I
inescapable.
misunderstood.
Like, I mean, I think Corso's a credible voice, and I take him seriously because of his verifiable pedigree. Yeah, well, look, we're not blessed with certainty, so we churn over the details, you know, and that is the existential angst of the modern UFO information follower, I guess. Like, we're all in this state of bardo or whatever, you know, like, it's maddening in a way, but I think it is the reality that we're currently dealing with. So I guess let's deal with it.
What does bardo mean?
It's sort of like a third state of reality where you're kind of separate from. I think it's ancient Hindu, maybe Buddhist kind of concept. Okay. Again, I might be slightly misusing it, but it does explain a kind of purgatory kind of notion of a state of being where you're kind of not alive, you're not dead, you're not in the world, just sort of kind of a limbo.
Like a limbo.
I think as a phrase, it's used in a similar way. As limbo, but it has its own kind of ancient sort of connotations because it actually does come from ancient writings somewhere in the Near East. I think it's ancient Hindu, possibly ancient Buddhist.
Right.
It's from
which we tend to favor as
well, it's like
as white Western people in terms of what could be like old
it's
and
definitely
truthful.
Right up there in the greatest hits of sort of philosophical human thought. Like, you know, it's like it's a classic.
Under the bridge, if we have to, we go to words. Because I guess it speaks to us.
I mean, Hinduism is just so weird. I don't know really what to think of it. Their whole sort of personified God thing is so complex, and I don't know what to think of it, really.
The multiple arms mean multi dimensions. They are so far above us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I feel about a pantheon like that. Like, honestly, maybe the whole idea of God seems a bit silly to me, but like, I don't know. Buddhism, on the other hand,
feels more fair because it feels more singular.
It feels
it's
more
less
like
players on the team.
It also feels to me more like something that you think could exist in nature. There's no actual God. There's reincarnation. There's this kind of eternal cycle of stuff. Right.
I wonder because
with what you could imagine happens in nature. You know, like again, so but this it has a bit of a leg up on some of the other.
I'm gonna just add this layer that because it was from a darker feeling, there was more molasses. Just gonna say it this way. You can send emails, spacecap13@gmail.com, just memory. And then we get refined, weighty sugar. We're just going to go with one thing. Basically, one thing. We're going to go with one.
I love that book, Siddhartha. You know,
so did I. Come on.
Like, if you want to just sort of drink up that sort of Buddhist feelings, like, you know.
It feels like you're right there. Yeah. Because in that second, you know it, you feel it.
But Hermann Hesse, I believe, was Scandinavian, possibly German. Yeah, so, you know, it's obviously kind of the Western coloring of it. But it's a beautiful book.
You know, right.
So, Bardo. Bardo. So we're stuck in a state of kind of spiritual limbo, not being allowed to have certainty about any of this shit. So, you know, whatever. We're all in that same boat together. So I figure we just acknowledge it and move on, right? So more anomalies of the moon. Like the moon
full of anomalies.
Well, you know, and it's kind of like one of these things that's sort of like planetary observation is sort of limited. Yeah. Like all we really have done is
at least we landed on it.
Carefully.
Have we actually considered the fact we didn't
Well, look, I'm sure the moon is the most studied planetoid in the solar system beyond the Earth, right? It's the
Right,
closest
fair.
one.
Right now, Mars is getting a lot of representation through
Yeah.
the Musk as
Well,
well.
it's
right
a fascinating place, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like,
All of the planets are worthy.
yeah,
And
like
satellites, sorry.
we've sent probes to most of them. More like the closer, the more probes. The closer the planets, the more probes.
Right.
Like
we haven't been
like
to
Pluto,
Uranus.
for example. Well, no, we've done flybys by Uranus and
Have
Neptune.
we?
Oh yeah,
right.
but
Not
like
with a human
we've only
in it.
no, God no.
No.
But at least in the publicly acknowledged NASA probe sort of science. Yeah, no, like we've sent probes, but the outer planets like have maybe been visited once or twice. Over the years, like it's not easy to get things out that far. So, like again, so I guess the point I'm making is that we're sort of in the infants of our understanding of planets and the science of it all.
Definitely.
So, like whenever you're trying to analyze like something like the moon, like
ring the bell.
Kind of don't.
Let's just ring the bell. Can you tell the bell story? Why it rings? Talk about the hollow moon.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, let's.
Bounced it right back. Bounced it right back. I get sweaty.
No, I mean it is one of the magical kind of aspects of this whole kind of era of thought, like basically the Apollo missions put down seismic detectors at each of the land.
Seismic detector?
Basically, it's a thing that detects earthquakes.
It tells
and
what
sort
kind
of vibrations underneath in the lunar structure. And at each Apollo moon site, like they actually put a series of detectors, basically as far away from each other as was practical for as far as they were going on that thing.
Right.
Like the first
Apollo
11
suits.
lamps.
Yes.
The landing, they didn't really go that far from the lander. Like, maybe.
Well, they were already freaked out.
Well,
freaked out. I can't even believe they left their little spaceship to go out onto the landing if all the big ones were surrounding them already. I think it takes acts of bravery.
Well,
and so, and in my hands, I'm pretending to applaud NASA. Good for y'all.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
I'd be scared, but I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to do when you're out there on the moon, and I guess you just have to do what you think.
Well, I think we have to assess a sort of a duality of reality here, where we're sort of to consider like what might have happened given the UFO reality on the moon.
Although there is stuff that happens in space, it's bad for your eyes. It can make you depressed. So,
well, and other people don't deal well with fame if they're kind of private. Like I suspect that's part of the story with Armstrong. It's like I think after a while he just sort of rejected the fame in a very kind of blunt way, and I kind of admire him for it. But anyway, yeah. So the bell. Okay, so basically they put these earthquake detectors as far as they could get them on each landing, and over the years on the 5 or whatever number of landings it is, they put a bunch of them in. So those detectors were basically had sort of batteries in them and maybe solar panels or something, I don't know. But basically they were transmitting the moon data like to the Earth receivers from the late 60s and early 70s when the detectors were put down.
Right.
And apparently they lasted until like the late 70s before that system ran out of batteries or malfunctioned or whatever. But basically
into space junk, which is another conversation for somebody else's podcast. Actually, I feel like we're not recycling on space gas.
Space junk, like on the moon, worries me less than space junk in low Earth orbit that could clog it up to the point where we can't.
Elon Musk's Tesla that's in outer space. Wait, we got to hear ring the bell. Do it.
Okay. Anyway, so earthquake detectors. So like on the first moon landing, they had a series of earthquake detectors that were like placed around the initial landing site. So when they took off, like if you've ever seen the footage of it, because they had a camera placed to sort of show you that the lunar lander, just the top part blasts off the bottom part, the part with the legs, the main sort of boxy part on the bottom stays on the moon.
Yes.
And like the top part, the sort of more bulby shaped one, well, it takes off on a different rocket because like basically it landed.
Where does it go?
Well, back up to the Apollo capsule in moon orbit at this point. It's like it's how the astronauts got off the moon. They didn't take their whole lander with them. They left the feet and the bottom half of it, which was the rocket and all the fuel that they landed with. But to take off to get back up to the capsule that's going around the moon, like they had to like blast off. And you've seen the footage like of.
Fair, I have not. I wasn't there. But
so anyway, like that escape stage had like a booster rocket that on the way back up to the capsule basically ran out of fuel and got ejected.
Okay.
And it's a pretty heavy thing. Like,
sure.
Like even empty of fuel, like it was like hundreds of pounds.
Yeah.
Like it was a metal fucking rocket assembly kind of thing. And it fell during that takeoff.
Oh, so this is through a mistake.
Yeah.
That we learned this.
Well, the first time we observed this phenomenon.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, like they weren't
that is a
looking
beautiful
for
thing
it.
That's given to us by...
Like basically when Armstrong and Aldrin like took off the first thing and they dropped their fuel booster rocket like back to the moon because they needed to let it go so they could get higher to get to the capsule or whatever. Like rockets of that era were these sort of multi-stage deals where they would use up all the fuel in one part and then it would eject. That was the whole stage thing. So anyway, like when that thing landed, and it landed like maybe 50 kilometers away from the initial landing site, like the detectors detected basically a vibration that went on for like a day.
Yeah.
Like it created this vibration.
It rang like a bell.
Essentially, like these are...
And
like,
it went up to a point and then it descended in vibration. Like a bell. Like
very much.
Banging a bell.
But like the thing that's sort of significant about that is sort of like when similar impacts happen on Earth, like
what happens?
It's the thud. Like it's not a bell.
Boom. Yeah.
It's like Earth doesn't ring like a bell in the same way. Like it is completely surprising thing that completely baffled like all the scientists. Because they have to understand like this piece of it was publicly discussed because I think.
Yes, it was.
They didn't really know like the implications.
This is above board, not classified secret, unclassified.
Yeah, well, it's apparently they registered all kinds of impacts over the years, and got all kinds of anomalous.
Things been hitting the moon a lot?
Yeah, well, the moon gets hit by the odd meteorite, right? And through this space activity, like they like on purpose drop some even heavier things. Like once true. They realized that it was a thing to be monitoring.
How do you feel about
they kind of experimented.
Why did they do that? And is it like why put nukes in outer space? I feel uncomfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any real peaceful reason to do that. I mean, I think some satellites have had effectively what they call nuclear batteries.
Right.
Where essentially this sort of long-term uranium reactor kind of thing that isn't a nuclear bomb exactly, but it is like very much a nuclear thing.
Right.
And that's part of the whole NASA thing. Like, I don't know. Like, I think the primitive monkeys, like, obviously, we're not going to do it as clean as those aliens do it. But we're just coming out.
And apparently, the number of nukes we have let off is huge and amazing. And sometimes we do let nukes off into space. Why the duck?
We've never publicly blown up any nukes in space.
Okay.
There is like a rumor that gets sort of tied into this whole sort of Apollo legendary kind of body of discussion that says that the real reason for Apollo 13, the one that didn't get to land because they had like the technical problems and they had to like MacGyver their way back to Earth, and like there's a Tom Hanks movie.
Oh yes,
yeah, like it's all legendary, right. But the implication is that on that flight they had a nuclear bomb that they wanted to experimentally detonate on the moon, and that what the public version that we've heard is a bit of a cover story, and it was more of an alien intervention,
right?
Basically, sort of basically saying, no, you don't bring nukes to our fucking house.
Don't.
You know,
Yeah.
like that's the
What are you
implication.
coming with your
Again,
nukes?
it's like another
It's
thing.
like driving up to your
that's
pal's house
discussed
for
but-
their birthday, but you brought your weapon. You brought your guns and stuff. Hey, it's your birthday.
Well, I would say like the whole history and our understanding of alien intervention in our world certainly would support the idea that they're not fans of the whole nuke thing, and they're not fans of the fact that we're playing around with the nuke thing, and like all of like the control over nuclear weapon systems. They've been able to shut down our silos
they
and
can
like
do
make
whatever
our
they want.
missiles go
But-
off course and all that shit. So like
many people will say counter to that, though, they don't stop nuclear war and they don't stop bad things. And
well, I don't
just
think
being
we've ever put
devil's
them to that
advocate.
test yet. Like,
No,
I mean,
I think
like if
that's-
they're
why do you think they can't? Do you think? Oh, okay. Maybe
Well,
you're right. I hope you're right. Actually, I like this.
my
better.
take is that the UFOs have demonstrated their ability to shut our nukes off as sort of a warning against using them, sort of telegraphing their interest in the importance
But where
of it
are
all
they
to kind of
now?
like make sure us human monkey men
Yes,
sort of like
yes.
take it serious and don't fuck around with that shit.
right,
Like that's the impression I get.
right. But
But
they
you know,
don't
we
go
haven't
as
actually
far
tried to do
as-
nuclear war. There hasn't been one that the aliens have saved us from,
No.
as far as I know.
They don't. Are they looking after Israel and the Palestinians now? No. Is anybody looking into Russian Ukrainian hell? No. I mean,
Interestingly
but that
enough,
might-
I certainly haven't picked up
I
any
don't think
scuttlebutt about UFO aspects to those current conflicts.
I don't think they think that way in that.
Well,
Right?
my take is that
Or what- I don't know.
their lack of transparency to Earth in general, the fact that they're a secret, is something that the aliens are aware of and probably support. I don't think it's in their interest to reveal themselves to us in some really unambiguous way without our governments doing it for them. Like, I don't know. It's just like conjecture, really. Like, I'm just
right,
assuming
fair.
that,
But
like,
actually,
if they wanted to show in themselves to us,
show us.
they
Yeah.
obviously could like fly giant
Yes.
UFOs over our cities, and
Yes,
it would
but
be undeniable.
and they do, and people see it, and they upload things, and they
I've
show
seen
it.
some wild footage, but like it's impossible to know if it's real.
And furthermore, they did fly all over the capital of America land. And
Well, there's
they
that famous
put it down
thing
to,
in Washington in what was it, like
yes,
the late 40s,
yes.
I think it was. Yeah,
or 50s.
early 50s. Yeah, I don't know. It was in that era, certainly.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've seen
But
like
then they
film
debunked
footage
it
of
for
it.
themselves. Yes.
Well, you know, it's kind of like one of those things that is sort of like you don't necessarily have to believe what they tell you. I think we've established the fact that
Right.
there's something fishy here, and there's
I think
probably
the
something going on
greater-
if we can't necessarily
Yes.
define it fully.
The greater
Like
community
we call
is
them on their
dealing
bullshit
with
to
that.
some degree, and it's like, of course they're going to deny everything. That's what they've been doing all along. Like it's really not like a new mystery that we
Yeah.
have to decode. Like
No.
it's just kind of, as
It
I
was
say, just
always
part of that
that
existential kind of thing about this politics. It's infuriating, but it is what it is, you know. Like, so yeah, they deny all that shit. But like, I've seen the footage. I've heard enough testimony about that particular event that certainly would support that something happened. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it was a bunch of lights in the sky. You know, hard to know exactly what that is. You know, like I would guess that the government had radar sensors and all this shit, but that they're not telling us. You know,
No.
they might well have known more about that than they were admitting, and that's, I think, we just have to assume that's the way they roll, right? You know, like I think that's what we've been fighting all these
They're
years.
good
right?
at, but and then well, whenever you get through imminent, I'm just now we're driving far away. We're driving up into modern day. No, it left me. Oh, that was painful. Ouch.
Interesting, related to the whole Apollo 13 thing that is
Okay.
rumored to be
Yes,
like a
yes.
nuclear related situation. That was one of the main situations where they were able to like drop something heavy on the moon and see it on the sensors.
By accident.
Well,
By
no, it's
accident.
because they were in disaster mode and they couldn't, like, if you remember the movie, that's kind of our probably best version of way to understand it. But basically, like, they had technical problems. They thought they were going to die. Like, they were
Right.
around the moon, but they couldn't land because their whole capsule was breaking.
Okay.
So basically, they were able to just sort of
Fly
drop
away.
the whole No, they were able to drop the whole
heavy
lander,
bits.
the heavy bit that they were going to use to land on the moon.
Right, and head
because they
back
didn't
to
use
Earth.
it. Like they basically dropped it on the moon, and that's the heaviest thing that NASA did
That
this
made
experiment with. The
That
gong
rang
bell thing. Yeah, so
like a bell.
that was the heaviest one. And basically that one rang for basically 3 hours and 20 minutes. It was like 108 miles from
Is
the
that
crash
all?
site. There was
3 hours.
in
and
1972, the detectors,
Okay.
there was a
Okay.
meteor strike on the moon that they were able to do.
Okay.
And it was like,
Oh.
I mean, it wasn't the biggest meteor, but it was huge. And it was like the equivalent of, I think,
Right.
200 tons of TNT was the sort
Wow.
of explosive force of that. And yeah, it sent shockwave through the moon in ways that they were able to detect. Because at that point in 72,
They had
it was sort of
things-
late in the Apollo program, so they had pretty much as many detectors.
sensors.
Yeah, they'd landed a bunch of times and put sensors in different parts of the moon. So at this point, they had a bigger network, could get better readings. And yeah, apparently the results, were quite confounding.
Can I ask a question to you directly, Christopher? That just purely your feeling. Okay, why did the alien presence allow us to leave little sensors?
Well, the implication is that basically we landed on the moon. They basically
Are they
showed
proud
themselves.
of us, or did they feel like
I don't know. That's a bigger question.
they're not proud of us?
Well,
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, again, we're in an information deficit here, right? Like we don't really
Correct.
know what we're dealing with. Like it seems like
At
the
all.
Ebens is what we know about them.
Yes.
They seem to like us.
I like that.
I think
I mean,
the
on the
implication
other hand,
is
they
that, like,
will
some of those-
genetically work on us after.
yeah. Well, we can't project our own moral structures onto
Fair.
aliens. Like
Fair.
it's sort of like the
Boom.
context for them, I think, is different,
Boom.
and that's the way I understand that.
sorry, that's
You know,
the truth of that. Yeah.
But okay, so basically the implication is that we landed on the moon. They sort of showed their cards, and i.e. this moon is ours. Like the implication,
But they're like, okay, put down your little knapsacks here and there if you
well,
want to
it even
throw jacks.
It even goes into a deeper place where, like, basically they were photographing the moon for a number of years before they landed. NASA. They were flying orbiters around the moon for years before they actually landed.
There was photos that we haven't seen that obviously have. Do you think they have secret, wonderful photos of? Yes, they do. I mean,
well,
Google,
there's certainly. Okay. Well, again, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but like there are thousands of moon photos that are official.
Okay.
And there are many researchers that find weird looking details in all these photos, and you can go to websites and you can look at thousands of them. Like what I have to say is that number one, the ones that have the most wild looking shit, like you don't have a total confidence in its total provenance.
Okay.
Like it's kind of a fast and loose thing where
don't say fast and loose.
Not,
really?
well,
on the moon? I mean, I guess that's a silly question.
Well, it's like the rumor is, and like there's lots of credible people who've made these claims. Like one of my favorite is a guy named Carl Wolf. And
Love the name. Love the name.
Good
hey,
name.
Carl.
American,
Shout out.
He was an American Air Force photo analyst.
Wow.
Long career. And basically he hooked up with Stephen Greer.
Oh, that guy. Oh, we should do an episode actually on the Dear Greer.
Yeah, no, we could talk a lot about him. He's a fascinating guy. I saw him live once. And that was cool. It was neat to be in the same room with that guy.
Whoa, save that, obviously.
But anyway, Carl Wolf, Air Force photo analyst, verified career, whistleblower, came out and testified in the sort of congressional press conference that Greer did in
back
2001.
Was it way back in 2001?
It was 2001.
What,
and
just after 9/11? No.
I think it might
have
have
actually... 17?
No,
okay, it was... really?
No, this was like 20 years ago, like 20 whatever years ago. No, it was early I don't know.
Okay, maybe 2004.
I'm gonna say it actually was before the Twin Towers.
Whoa.
It was in that year, but I think
Okay.
it might have been in the summer of that year,
All
earlier
right.
in the summer.
Okay.
Not really a related
Intense?
thing,
I
but
don't know, but
like-
maybe another
Well,
episode.
I remember at the time, like Greer was all over like the paranormal radio shows, hyping this sort of disclosure project thing. Like that whole thing was just popping
I
up.
don't know if we should
And he
even
had-
talk about
he
Greer
had-
because then I want to talk about Greer crying. And I look like an A-bomb. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's move this along.
Oh well. Anyway, like Carl
okay, I
Wolf,
don't mean
like
to-
it relates to what we're talking about. So let me get this out.
Yes, sir.
Like
Yes,
he is, like Air Force photo analyst, whistleblower, part of the big hoo-ha that Greer kind of popped out with way back. But anyway, he testimonied that at one point in the early 70s, he was seconded to NASA photo labs because he was a photo technician guy. He was involved in that world. And at one point, he had an assignment that brought him into the NASA photo lab. And that this guy that he met there, who was one of the local technicians from there, like brought out this fucking pile of photographs, these big blow-ups of like crazy ass shit captured by the moon probes. And he said it was like mind-blowing. It was sort of like identifiable bases, like cities, like industrial activity.
Yes.
Most of it was on the side facing away from the Earth.
Wonder why.
And it's
come on.
like he said that basically the guy even said to him that, you know, I probably shouldn't be showing you this.
Love it.
This is sort of
I
slightly
love it.
off the
Oh my
books
God,
here,
I
but
love
here
it.
I am, man to man, photo nerd to photo nerd.
Do it.
I'm sort of like,
Do
I'm bending the rules that I'm showing you this because it's so wild that I just want you to see it.
Delicious.
And like, Carl Wolf kept it a secret for like 20 years.
How do you do that?
I don't know. I'm not
How
sure
much-
who. Like
why?
he probably told his wife. I don't know.
Come
Like who
on,
knows what
somebody.
the story is? But basically, he came out publicly with this whole testimony, like
Good man.
in the
Charlie Brown.
late 90s.
Better be
via
ducking
Greer.
true then, kiddos. Because that's a long time secret kidnaps.
But it's sort of like one of those stories that like his background's verifiable. He is who he says he is. But he doesn't have the photos.
Wait.
So we don't get to see them
No,
with the provenance
no.
that he saw.
Can I interject with something completely a little? Okay, I want to discuss. I feel like as a Canadian, I feel a type of American worship. I wish. What is that called? Do you know what I'm meaning of?
Well, you know,
Oh my
I
gosh,
think
because I feel
America
they're
is the
so-
ocean that Canadians swim in, whether we like it or
Right.
not.
Okay.
You know,
wow.
like it's an
Poetry.
unescapable
America
kind
is
of fact.
the ocean that Canadians swim upon.
Yeah.
Fist bump.
Whether we
did
like it or not.
Wow.
Like it just
Well,
is
we
there.
didn't connect proper.
They're like
Oh, we didn't
I
do
mean,
it again. Knuckles.
they're like-
Well, we did.
they're
Back
like-
to kids.
10 times bigger than us and
Yeah.
richer than us and
Money.
powerful enough than
They're
us.
so
like,
serious about their stupid shit.
you know,
Gosh.
honestly, I'm just glad that Canada isn't the main focus of America's
No,
like, attention.
and you know
like
what I wanna
I'm
say
happy
about
that we're
that?
sort of in the background for them because I don't really want them to focus on us.
Um,
We're not a problem. They can chill.
No, and a shout out to the Fifth Estate that will call Canada on its shite.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, the Fifth
And
Estate
that-
in a general media way,
Yes.
but also the CBC program, The Fifth Estate, that I've always been
That's
a fan
what I'm
of.
talking about.
Yeah. No, exactly. I love
Well,
that show.
why did you divide them into two?
Well, no, it's like the Fifth Estate is a term that comes
Is a
from
term.
before then.
Oh, I know.
And
I
it basically
look-
refers to like the
It's
media as being a
journalism.
criticism of
Journalism,
and critique
that's-
of the power structures,
Yes.
you know. And it's
You
like
start
they're
with royalty down, you get
Yeah.
a homeowner person, then you have journalists.
yeah,
the Fifth
yeah.
Estate.
And that's the
Yes.
Fifth Estate. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
we're gonna
yeah.
cheers on that.
And it's
Nice.
pure poetry, obviously,
Yes.
and I think it does speak to some reality about our world, and that in itself is poetry. But yeah,
Yes, it is. Where are we now?
So anyway, this meteor like impacted on the moon, big
It rang
meteor.
like a bell.
They got the readings, and it basically was very weird. And something in the science of it certainly
Doesn't make sense.
would
It
support-
scared Carl Sagan.
would definitely support, if not a hollow moon, a moon that's suspiciously less dense,
Yes,
and
that's
possibly
a perfect
cavernous.
word. I
Then-
mean, how are there moon rocks upon soil it's wrong, Christopher? I mean, you
Yeah.
see the anomalies that are incorrect to the moon.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, there's more, like
Okay, I'm
the whole
looking
fact
down
of its orbit, the fact that it's almost a perfect circle, which is like very rare,
Ingo Swan. Can we go to Ingo?
Well, Ingo,
Can we do it, buddy?
well,
Please.
I mean, I think you have to give some context around Ingo Swan.
Go,
he was
do
like
it.
the premier, essentially,
Yes, he
inventor
was.
of the science of remote viewing. He was a brilliant guy. He was an artist. He was this sort of very
Yes.
credible, interesting person. And like
a genius, like a little
Oh.
cigar.
yeah.
Homosexual? I think so. Is
out-
there anything wrong?
proudly,
Meow.
just like out and proud, like for like way before that was even common.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Ingo's awesome. And I love every interview of him I've ever been able to find.
But we're
Yeah.
not speaking about what he's most famous for, his involvement.
Well, he
in-
wrote a book called Penetration. And
because he
wrote
is
in the late. Yeah, well, it was a metaphor for remote viewing, obviously.
remote viewing.
But what it was is it came out.
Maybe you should give context to remote viewing quickly.
Okay, well,
What is
remote viewing is essentially the scientific name given to basically what was colloquially and culturally known as clairvoyance. It's the idea that your brain and your consciousness can key into things that are beyond
Which
their
is
immediate
apparently
context.
a vestigial. A vestigial. It's something like our tails. It's a vestigial aspect that humans had.
Well, that's what Ingo would have said, and that's what he said. Like basically,
So
how
did
Ingo.
so did Luis Alessandro.
I think that's.
In his
I think that's.
best-selling novel right now.
Is it a novel or is
Imminent.
it a nonfiction?
No. Oh, yes. Thank you, Christopher. Oh, sorrowful. Oh, Space Cab Keith
But book.
will have a bloopers and you can win. Nay.
Anyway.
Okay. Oh, I lost. Where did we go?
I'm just.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
that was a bit
hang
of a
on.
derail.
I know. I'm sorry
We were
myself.
talking
Oh my
about
gosh,
something.
I'm so destroyed by that.
Well, hopefully Colin's after doing some.
It's a vestigial
Yeah, no,
quality
that seems to
that
be the modern
apparently
understanding of remote viewing. And how Ingo
even-
Swan came into focus is
Okay.
that basically in the late 60s, there was this book that came out of the Soviet Union called Soviet Psychic Experiments Behind the Iron Curtain.
Really?
It
Was that a book?
It was a
came
book
out?
that
Oh, I
came out
haven't
of
read-
Russia,
Oh.
and it made a big splash kind of in the late 60s.
Can you slowly repeat the name for all of us who are writing it down? Okay.
Well, I'm trying to get this name from memory, so I'm
Okay,
not sure if I've got this
well,
totally
fair,
right.
Fair.
But it was something to the effect of Psychic Experiments Behind the Iron Curtain, or something
Psychic
like
starts
that.
with a P.
And it's a famous book, and it made a big splash. And basically, apparently in American military,
Psychic
Akimaks,
experiments within the
basically-
Soviet Union?
they started,
Is that what the
Yeah,
name
yeah.
is?
yeah, like it would Behind the Iron Curtain or in the Soviet Union, something like that. Like, I'm sorry,
Okay.
you're pushing me on
we
a name. I don't have
understand.
instant
I know,
recall
we
of
push
that,
it.
but it's something like that.
It's Fast
Google
and
it.
Loose. We're playing Fast and
Well,
Loose.
I mean, it's just, I can't remember the name of the book exactly, but it's a famous book. You could find it. Anyway, apparently this got the military establishment in America
Right. They were
thinking
like,
that if
"We
the
gotta
Russians
do
are
that."
working on psychics, we got to get our people on that. And that created basically these research programs, people like Hal
So
Perot.
then in walks Ingo, all with Yuri. Yuri's kind of a thing.
Well, basically when the
Yuri's a
scientists
thing.
got the
He's like, I'm
funding.
bending a spoon. But
Oh,
then
Yuri Gilly's a whole other thing.
I know.
But basically, when the scientists
Okay.
got the funding from the fucking CIA or government or military to study this shit, like what they did is they found a natural psychic that was already doing it. And that was Ingo. Ingo was publicly known as this clairvoyant.
I'm sort of.
He had these kind of psychic powers, and it was he had a very good reputation. So what
Was he making money and living in living in clothing that he was accustomed to? These are my questions.
As I take it, he was
I
sort of
wanna
like
know.
a hippie artist from New
Yes.
York that was sort of had
Amazing.
this psychic sideline, and
Can
it
you
was sort of
imagine?
but he was so good at it, he become sort of known.
a thing. People
it's
wanted him.
Ingo is the most fabulous
Yes,
type
he is.
dude that you could
Yes.
ever imagine.
Yes.
The guy sort of radiates cool in a way that is sort of almost timeless, and it's God knows what he got up to. But
Should
anyway,
we speak about his,
the scientists studied
niece?
him. Sorry, what?
Should we discuss his niece quickly?
Yeah.
Or put a shout out towards her?
I'm forgetting her name right now. It's not
same.
Swan, but
No,
she's been all over the media recently,
and
she wrote a book, I believe, about her experiences with Ingo.
Sorry, we
And,
might have to come back to
She
that
was
then.
close to Ingo for many years, knew him well, basically knew him through the various phases of his life,
And
could
is
speak
also-
quite well about
But is she
who Ingo
also
really
a
was.
remote viewer, possibly? Does she not work in the field, perhaps?
I don't
We're
believe
not certain.
that's her
We'll have to
claim.
come back. Well, that's
But
fine,
I
sorry.
think she's interested in it,
Mhm,
I don't
mhm,
think she makes
mhm.
those kind of claims. But
All right.
basically, Ingo was her uncle,
Okay,
you
good
know,
enough,
and
fair.
they were close
Wow,
basically
no,
through her whole
stumbling
life,
through we
Ingo
going into that.
passed maybe 2012, roughly somewhere in there.
Gee,
He did live into the 2000s.
why didn't
but
I know then? I didn't know. Christopher's from before I knew. All right, let's move back towards where we are in this manuscript. Where are we now? We've gone to.
Okay. Well, anyway, as it relates to the moon,
Okay.
Ingo wrote a book called Penetration, and it basically tells a story
Great
of an
name.
experience that he had basically in the mid 70s, kind of maybe as Apollo was winding down, and his involvement in the CIA psychic program was a little bit less. He was more freelance. He was an artist, and he was he did all kinds of things. He wasn't maybe doing the government work at that point so much.
He was bored by that point with them as well.
Again, I think being the pet
Ingo
monkey
was,
psychic for the CIA was a bit of a weird. Well, my take is that Ingo was an expansive free spirit that basically.
Talk about the twins. I think we do this in our AI.
No. I think we maybe touched on it. But so in the book Penetration, he talks about basically being visited by these bizarre people that were these two twin men who were totally buff and dressed in totally wild outfits.
He gets a phone call.
Yeah. Basically, the upshot of it is some intelligence agency person that didn't fully.
Name? Yes.
Basically,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, he mentions the name of the guy that he was dealing with, but it was just a first name. And his understanding is that it was some high level intelligence official who had the ability to.
But it's so much weirder than that.
Well, he agreed just to work for them. It was sort of like a limited job. It was very well paid, he said.
And it was. I'll do that with you.
So, he said he agreed to it. They drive
them underground.
Yeah, well, basically, he agrees to it. These weird guys show up, and they're really freaky because they're beautiful twins, buff as fuck, and dressed to the nines, and just not like the normal people that you ever see. And he was taken by them, and maybe that's just him projecting his own particular style on it. But anyway, he tells a neat story about it. So they take him to this sort of undisclosed location in Washington, and he meets Mr. Big. This gentleman.
It is Mr. Big, but it's not, that wasn't his name.
His name is in the book.
Of course, it is in the book. Get Penetration on your own.
But it's
Space Cap. I know you.
His name's unimportant, but basically, I don't think he identifies himself as being a particular agency, but it's kind of understood that this is big intelligence because Ingo wasn't tied into that. He makes
him stay there.
Yeah, he has to stay at a place
underground.
He has a little apartment where he's got a bed and a fridge. Yeah,
but then he feels weirded. He feels guilted into going into the gym.
Yes, but he had a gym that he was able to access. And he was there for about a week.
Where the twins were there.
Yeah, it's.
But he feels. I mean, he was like.
Well, I think Ingo basically thought this was a very bizarre experience, and like I think writing the book was also a way for him to sort of
Get it out.
share kind of how
Talk about
bizarre
this.
this whole scenario was, and honestly, I believe every word Ingo says. He's like inherently credible guy. I don't see him as a fantabulist or a liar
at all. No, not at all. Good man, he is. Good man.
So anyway, he was hired to do like a remote viewing thing. He wasn't told exactly what he was going to be looking at. He gets into the room and basically is given the envelope with the coordinates and like they're recording everything. And basically he figures out that basically he's tasked on the moon. And he spends like all kinds of sessions like looking at crazy locations on the moon they're feeding him.
Oh, does he do more than a few sessions? More than
it's a couple of days worth, as far as my understanding in the book.
Okay.
Like, but basically, he's tasked at the moon. He's looking at alien bases
until
there's humans there. There's various kinds of aliens.
Looks back at him.
Yeah,
and it's not human.
Yes, and he tells like Mr. Big, and they basically say, "Okay,
get him out! Come on, get out!
Yeah.
Because they are way more psychic than you, my friend.
Well, that was the implication, and it's sort of like, and the intelligence people shut it down. So
there are people on the moon. There are NHI on the moon. At least there were then. As far as
that's what Ingo saw, and Ingo was an amazing talent for that.
I also want to bring this up to date. Then I will also mention, people will know, having read the book, Imminent. Also, Louis was a remote viewer, not at the same time. Post Ingo.
Yeah, well, Ingo is fairly descriptive in the book in terms of describing what he saw, you know, and he describes like domed structures and humans there, but also, or human-like beings, but also...
I don't think they're humans necessarily.
Yeah, but like human form to the point where you could look at them and you might think they're human, but they're obviously not in a normal context.
Aliens have a human form.
Yeah, well...
Somewhat.
That reptilian woman interview,
okay.
She claims that those reptilians have a technology that can fool us into thinking that they look like they're human, but it's a technological thing. But like
one of the Bushes, the royalty is already reptilians, are they not?
Well, I've seen the weird glitch videos. I don't know what to make of them. I mean. Something George Bush Sr. does something weird with his eye at one video.
I've heard about it, but have never seen it, and I most certainly would love to.
It's freaky, but it's hard to tell if it's not just sort of video,
weird,
weirdness. Like analog video can have weird artifacts, so it's sort of like, it's weird, but in and of itself, I'm not sure it's proof of anything.
Right. You don't see it like an alien eye, like a snake.
Senior Bush was a weird dude who had finger in a lot of weird pies, and we could do a whole podcast on him. But
what? Maybe I'm gonna write. I'm just putting it in the sidebar. Bush. But
I've come into a lot of places over the years in terms of him. Like during the Reagan era, like I was sort of a leftist hippie punk kid that was anti-nuke and protesting, like
hope so.
Like the whole Reagan thing, and like Bush was definitely a part of that. So at the time, I didn't view him kindly. I once stood about 10 foot away from Ronald Reagan.
Take a break and have dinner.
Okay,
so we're just. I'm sorry, I just did that weirdly to everyone in Space Cab. I have to figure out how to stop us. We're gonna stop for dinner break.